Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. I'm joined by Kevin Flaherty of KC Sports Network. We're going to break down KU football's 42-31 loss on the road to Missouri. I said in the postgame video last night after the game on the field, like there is so much to talk about. I don't know how long we're going to go for, Kevin, but man, like in terms of a game that had twists, it had turns, it has storylines, like in terms of content, you could not have asked for, I think, a more interesting football game. You were there, obviously, as well as I was. Kevin, what was your experience like kind of watching the game in person there? What'd you think of the atmosphere and everything kind of that went around the game? Let's not get the game itself, but just kind of the atmosphere around it. What'd you kind of think?
Yeah, the atmosphere was pretty terrific. I think we got our first, bleep KU chant. What about 2 hours ahead of the game, and so it was a fan base that was very excited for the return of the border war. I think maybe there's not a better example of the atmosphere swaying than when you have a kid kicking for $25,000, and instead of even attempting the kick, even if you weren't going to make it, turning and kicking at the KU sidelines, after, having an anti-KU message on your chest. I mean, if it were me, I probably would have kicked for 25 grand. I mean, that's quite a bit of money, but uh, kudos to the guy for really buying into the rivalry. But that's kind of the hornet's nest that Kansas stepped into in this one.
Yeah, college is expensive.
Yeah,
Like it's not cheap, man. 25,000, if you're in state, maybe helps you out a little bit more, but out of state, that's, you're still on the hook for some stuff. Yeah, that was one of those. I thought when it initially happened, I thought it was one of those like planted things. Like you see at, like
yeah,
NBA games where it's like a fan proposes and then gets like mustard dumped on him or something. Like
yeah.
that's what I thought it was. And sure enough, I'm probably wrong in the end. Yeah, it was a good atmosphere. Um, yeah, I've got some takes. Maybe I'll give my takes later on in the show and save it. But I think overall it was a hostile crowd and one that I think if you're going to look at KU's schedule this year, right? KU doesn't play at K-State. KU, I think in terms of hard road games, right? Ames is going to be tough,
Yep.
but I don't know if it's going to be on the level that you saw last night. Um, Texas Tech,
Yep.
yeah, I don't know if it's going to be like that. So for KU, right, that's probably the toughest road game, the Jayhawks are going to have this year. And so the fact that I think KU managed things pretty well in terms of being able to kind of stick through it, not a ton of like pre-snap penalties or issues of miscommunication, right, for KU. So that part of it, I think, is a positive development. But all right, let's get into the game, Kevin.
Yeah.
We're going to go chronological, work our way through it, and then we'll hit some big picture stuff at the end because I don't think we can cover the game right by jumping around and doing that. So we'll probably end up missing stuff. So let's start here. KU's first offensive drive, they do nothing, right? First play from scrimmage, LeSean Williams runs into a crowd. Nice throw outside from Jalen to Carson Wentz, Levi Wentz. And then all of a sudden, KU tries to run the ball. Highshaw tackle for loss. Missouri gets the ball. They move it easily. It's missed
Yep.
tackles for KU. And it's just an ugly first drive. So after that, Kevin, what was your thought? Because at that moment, I was like, uh-oh, this could be bad if
Yeah.
what
It
we
was
just saw continues.
It was the worst possible start, and I
Mm,
think too, we'll get into it. I thought the line of scrimmage defensively played pretty well overall. Like when you look at the big picture of what happened yesterday, they did not play well on that first drive. Missouri came out and moved guys off the ball, and if you look at the Hardy touchdown run in particular, the Austin Alexander I think misses the tackle coming in from the side. He's missing that tackle like 7 yards downfield because the line of scrimmage has been so displaced by that Missouri offensive line. And so I think that was the thing that kind of jumped out to me right away was, hey, on the first drive, KU got no movement up front offensively. And then defensively, where you expected Kansas's defensive line to kind of hold its own at least against Missouri's offensive line,
mm.
Missouri was able to generate movement. KU missed tackles. That obviously wound up being something that I'm sure we'll talk about over the course of the game. But just about as bad a start to a rivalry game as you possibly could have imagined.
Exactly. Yeah, and for KU specifically, like it felt a lot like early Fresno State defensively,
Yeah,
where you saw guys in positions to make plays, right? If Austin Alexander finishes that tackle,
Yep.
um, it probably isn't a different result in terms of the drive because Missouri was still moving the ball well, but you're prolonging things. But it was rough. And at that moment, you think about the crowd going crazy. You think about KU's offense not really showing much on the first drive. And now you're thinking, okay, well, now all the onus is on KU. Like this
Yep.
drive offensively for KU, may as well be the game because of the fact of what you saw defensively on the first possession. So KU then comes back and puts together a really solid drive. They go on and they score, right? Sean Hanukkah gets the touchdown. Things looked a little bit better for KU there. And I think I saw a little bit more of the creativity
Yep.
from KU on that second drive. On the first drive, the first play looks like a triple option where, he gives it to Le'Shawn, but then he's got Deshaun Hanukkah coming across to kick a guy out. And then he's got Highshaw running with them, but he gives it to Le'Shawn. Then the next two, it's kind of just plain. But then on that second drive, it felt like there was a little bit more creativity from KU offensively to get guys off balance. And, I think about, KU could not line up in this game, and this was known going into it. This was not going to be a game where KU is going to line up and just out physical Missouri along the line of scrimmage with KU's offensive line. And so they
Yeah.
had to get creative, and I think you finally started to see some of that on that second offensive drive.
Yeah, and on the touchdown play, they had motion that kind of brought the safety up, and basically you had one corner either defending the guy on the outside or Hanukkah on the inside, and so Hanukkah winds up wide open. Jalen just kind of lofts it up there and lets him, have the easy catch or whatever. But yeah, it was a great response, and obviously, the blocked extra point that Mason Ellis nearly takes back. You were kind of like, okay, there's a little bit of fight there right before that. But it was exactly the response that KU needed to Missouri's first drive, and I thought KU settled in from that point.
Yeah, another play on that drive that really stood out to me was the throw to Bowden Gruen on fourth down.
Yeah.
That was one where that was all eye control. The way that KU designs the play where Bowden kind of goes out and a little bit of a wheel route. Um, it reminds me a little bit of the Jared Casey kind of fourth down touchdown
Yeah.
against Texas Tech a couple years ago, right? Where it's a well-designed play to a tight end who maybe people aren't thinking is going to get the ball on a big fourth down. First of all, what do you think of KU's decision to go for it there? Because that felt like a big statement of intent from KU and Lance Leipold that, hey, like, we got to go. We understand that this is a huge drive for us. What'd you think of the decision to go? I'm going to try and pull up what the numbers say, but what'd you think?
Yeah, I loved it because I thought one, it was short enough that it wasn't, too big of a question. Like it wasn't like we'll talk 4th and 7, I'm sure a little later, but it wasn't like a 4th and 7 where the distance makes it prohibitive. And so you're relatively close. And I think it's early in the game. You've still got pretty much your full playbook in front of you where you haven't shown everything yet. So you feel pretty good about what you would have in your pocket to run in that situation. And I think you make a great point in that if Missouri gets a stop there with all the momentum that Missouri had defensively previously, and if KU, punts that ball back or doesn't go for it or kicks the field goal or whatever, I think Missouri has a chance to go right down the field, and all of a sudden you're in, extreme danger zone type situation, and instead you wind up getting the touchdown, and it's kind of like, okay, game on.
Exactly. Game on and pulling up the numbers here. Yeah, go for it. Win probability 26% if you go for it, 21% if you punt, 5%. That's a good difference. So, KU does it, good play. And then, Deshaun Hanukkah with the score. And then this is where the game kind of got drunk for a little
Yes.
bit. So on the next possession, there are two guys that deserve shout outs on this play because number one, it's Mason Ellis for squaring up Bo Perbula.
Yeah.
And, because it's one of those where we've seen plenty of running quarterbacks have success against KU. Well, Mason Ellis really squares him up, but then it's Blake Carroll who comes from behind and just makes a great effort play on it to come from behind and knock kind of the ball out as Mason Ellis hits Perbula. And then obviously Austin Alexander's there for a scoop and score, right? First career touchdown for him. That in that moment, Kevin, I was sitting next to Jack in the press box and I said to him, I'm like, man, that felt like Oklahoma in 2023.
Yes.
right? Where it's a defensive score that gets KU at kind of a 2-possession lead, and you're thinking, wow, okay, that's a buffer that KU has that can be managed. And that play right there made me think, okay, this is now going to be a 4-quarter game because of the fact that now KU's got the chance to, the defense had, on the first 2 plays at least, had been solid. But then now there's some momentum back in KU's favor, and all of a sudden, kind of the flow of the game felt a little different.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that, I kind of thought at the time was we went into this not knowing anything about Bo Pribula in big games. And so there's the big mistake. How's he going to respond? Is this the sort of thing? I think I thought at that point where does this lead to more Pribula mistakes where, you maybe he has another turnover or two, or it was definitely we'll see how he responds to this type moment too. But yeah, all the momentum all of a sudden over the course of like a minute has entirely flipped back over to KU after Missouri having it early.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then you look at how things go on the next drive, right? And you mentioned KU's defensive line on the first drive and how they got pushed around. The thing that really stood out to me after that first drive, Kevin, was the fact that all of a sudden you started seeing guys get upfield. And this
Yeah,
is something I know we've talked about for years now, but I thought Trey Lathan, a newcomer on the team, really put it straightforward. Our guys are trying to get upfield. They're trying to get upfield, right?
yep,
And you saw that start to really happen where guys like Tommy Dunn, DJ Withers, Leroy Harris, all of a sudden those guys are a yard beyond the line of scrimmage and creating displacement. And all of a sudden you really saw that. And I thought Missouri had some struggles with that kind of in that first quarter into the second quarter range where, yeah, sure, when they ran outside zone stuff, yeah, the athleticism that they have showed. And KU sometimes struggled to get across and get gaps covered. But when Missouri tried to run between the tackles, they really couldn't. And a
yep,
part of that too is scheme with KU and the way that they deployed kind of that 3 defensive tackle look and kind of the 5D linemen at times, 3D tackles, right? The way that KU mixed up things, I thought gave Missouri some issues. But then all of a sudden, KU, right, is able to force a 3 and out and a punt. And that defensively, that little possession right there to me was another one of those early encouraging moments for KU where you're thinking, okay, like they answered the call offensively. Defensively, the defensive line now has answered the call. And that's what all you can ask for after a really slow start to the game.
yeah. And I thought it really set up what the defensive line was going to do from then on out. And again, like it sounds crazy to say when you look at Missouri's rushing yards, to say that hey, the defensive front played pretty well against the run, but a lot of that wasn't like you said. A lot of it was to the outside. A lot of it was hey, you've got guys in position and somebody misses a tackle. It wasn't necessarily hey, you're getting blown off the ball. And on that drive specifically, it was the exact opposite. When you look at the way that they really attacked the run on first down, and the way they got after Pribula after that on the next 2 plays, this was something where they were really generating push from the middle, and you're like, okay, like Kansas is feeling a little bit more comfortable here.
Yeah, and Tommy and John, right, get the sack, which is a big play. And then on third down, right, they don't convert. So then the ball goes into the air to Tate Nagy, and oh my God,
The Tate Nagy
like
experience.
I know I tweeted after, I think it was maybe Wagner, like it's just chaos when he touches the ball. But Kevin, for a true freshman who is what 160 pounds,
Maybe, yeah.
against an SEC team to be like, yeah, it's okay, guys. I'm just gonna like sidestep here and I'm gonna be patient. And like it didn't look like he was sped up, and he had a solid return on that one. Like
Yeah,
that's a play that if you're talking about momentum, well, all of a sudden a 21-yard return on a punt, that's going to keep kind of that momentum going and really
yep.
get you started. And man, I just give a quick little shout out to Tate Nagy for that, because I think KU has lacked that in the special teams department. Because
Yeah,
for so
yeah.
long, KU's been a team that it's like, okay, Luke, you're back there, just fair catch it. Or, Trevor Wilson, you're back there, kind of fair catch unless it's against UCF. So, to see that, I think is a positive development for KU. If you're going to talk about special teams being an area where KU had to be better, well, all of a sudden you're seeing maybe some marginal gains there with your special teams unit in the punt return game.
Yeah, punt return game, blocked extra point at that
Yeah.
point. I mean, you're starting to see it, and that's been obviously a trouble spot for KU over the years. When you look at kicking consistency, and Laith Marjan wound up being pretty good in that department as well.
Mm.
And so when you're looking at the special teams unit, they are having some gains, and it was interesting to see the way that Tate kind of attacked that too, in that he was kind of all over the place against Wagner, obviously, maybe a little more horizontal than vertical at times, but that was actually a return where he maximized everything he could have gotten from that.
Oh, exactly. 100%. And then comes a really big play, Kevin. Well, I guess, shoot, man, two really big plays. You look at Jalen fumbling on
Yep.
that play and Amir Herring having really good hands
Yes.
to grab the ball back. That's a huge kind of almost big momentum swing back Missouri's way, because if all of a sudden all this good stuff's happened to KU and then Jalen fumbles and Missouri has the ball, what, at the 50 or even maybe in KU territory, like that, all of a sudden that can get their team going and really can do that. But instead, KU gets the ball back, and then Jalen finds Levi Wentz 50 yards down the field, like a great throw to the outside, good route from Levi to create some separation, good
Yep.
hands. And that's a play. I pulled up kind of the EPA chart, which for people that watch on YouTube, you've seen this before. You look at the scrimmage play number, right? Just past 10, you see a big jump there. Well, that's a 50-yard play for KU.
Yep.
And one that really, I think, that's when you've seen KU be explosive. And it was an explosive play in a really big moment for KU in this one. And it came at a big time where all of a sudden KU setting themselves up to have a goal to go situation with a 2-score lead. Like it's just, it was a big play at a big time.
Yeah, yeah, a huge play, and I think too, when you look at how this team has sort of buttered its bread on vertical
Mm,
shots, you did have the one to Cam Pickett against Wagner that was kind of a fake bubble screen, and he was wide
mm,
open. But generally speaking, I mean, when they've wanted to throw it deep, they've thrown it to Emmanuel Henderson, and I think for Levi Wentz to get over the top the way that he did, you're kind of like, okay, they're utilizing the full range of weapons on this one, and
mm.
kudos to Levi for getting that step and making the play, and Jalen put that right where it needed to be. Perfect throw.
Yeah, exactly. And then KU scores and it's 21-6,
Yeah,
and that's just a game changing type of advantage for KU. And
stop the count.
well, that's funny. It was 1-2 though, Kevin. I turned to Jack and I said, "Man, this either is going to be a game that KU now is going to control, and it's going to be like a 20 or 31, 20 something type of game, or KU is going to lose." It just that's what it felt like, and it's been something that we've seen in some of these big games where KU gets leads early, and through game mismanagement, which we'll talk about, or poor decision making from players, KU has let teams back into the game. And I
Yep.
don't think necessarily, right, the next drive KU let Missouri back into the game, but I think the second quarter is really where things changed. And you could talk about, right, the really good drive that Missouri had, where they started to kind of turn the screw a little bit. They converted on some third downs at big moments. I mean, you get Missouri into a 4th and 2, and I mean, that play for KU, there's going to be a lot on tape that they can work on, I think, because that's the one, right, Kevin, where they run kind of what the Chiefs call it, hot dog or something, where they've got the guy that does the motion across, and
Yeah,
then
corn dog.
KU corn dog, thank you.
Yeah.
And DJ Graham and Jalen Todd didn't communicate on it, and so all of a sudden the guy's open on a 4th and 2. And that's another one. That's a sliding doors moment for KU, where if that's a stop, all of a sudden, well, you get the ball back, you're up 21-6, and you just stop Missouri for how many, third straight drive it would have been at that point with big
Yep.
plays. Um, and then obviously, right, the following drive is when kind of disaster hits. And this was, for me, I think the biggest sliding doors moment in the entire game. So Jalen sacked. It's a fumble. There's a lot to break down in this play. I wish I was able to pull up the video, but YouTube won't let me. So to start the play, right, Kevin's, Bryce Foster is trying to kick out left to
Yes.
get the defensive end, and he trips over Tavake. Okay, now that defensive end has a free run at Jalen, and Jalen, you could see in the split seconds, like, okay, I can get out of this. Oh shoot, no, this guy's really fast. He's on top of me.
Yeah.
And kind of that split second of indecision results in him getting hit, the ball coming out, a Missouri player batting it forward, and then it going into the end zone and Kobe Baines jumping on it. Give us your thoughts on the play, because I have a couple more follow-up questions to get your take on it. But it just like that for me was the single play that really did, swing the game. Because it's a huge moment.
Yeah, it is. And, even if he didn't trip over Tavake, he would have tripped over Calvin Clements because that side
Hmm.
of the line kind of got pushed back.
Yeah.
And if they had held their ground and Bryce Foster was able to get out there, like you said, it might have been a big play because a lot of times when Kansas does that little half boot or
Mhm.
whatever, they're looking to get the ball down the field and really try and hit on a big play. And so instead, like you said, Bryce Foster trips, goes entirely to the ground. Jalen never really has a chance,
Mhm.
like just doesn't. And also probably doesn't really have. There are times we can get after Jalen for his ball control. He can be a little bit loose with it. I'm not sure that was a great example. I mean, it just happened so fast.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I 100% agree with you that that was just a huge moment because all of a sudden, at that point, you're like, man, it's Missouri just keeps chipping away at this thing.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, at this point, Swain, you're starting to look at it. It's a safety. You're kicking the ball back to Missouri. Man, it feels like KU hasn't had the ball a whole lot lately. And that was something that would really play out over the second quarter, but over the course of the game as well, where you start looking at that time of possession difference, you start looking at the difference in the number of plays.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, it's, oh my gosh, the defense has been out there a lot.
Yeah. And you could think about it, Kevin, right? Even in the first quarter, 3 and out for KU offensively. That's not, that's not ideal in terms of you're going to do a ball control type of game. Defensive touchdown means the offense or the opposing offense is right back out on the field. Then you've got this play. And so, yeah, there were several times where it's literally like in terms of your offense sitting on the sideline. I would have loved to go through and like track the amount of time in the first quarter,
Yep.
real time, that the offense was on the sideline, because it may have been, I mean, 30 minutes maybe. Like
It
it was a
felt like they could have watched a movie or like at least an episode of your favorite TV show. I mean, they were off the field for a long time.
They really were. And so, Kevin, real quick to hit on this. So, win probability for KU before that fumble and safety, 63.7%. Win probability after that play, 36.8.
Oof.
Like you're talking
That's a
about
jump, yeah.
that's a huge swing at that time of the game. And Missouri took advantage, right? And even then, it wasn't a full taking advantage either. But man, Missouri controlled the ball, controlled the clock, and KU eventually is able to get a stop in the red zone and force a field goal, which at the time it's 21-18. It's like, okay, you know what? It could have been worse for KU in
Yes.
terms of just the way that that's kind of little section of the game played out, where the defense finally kind of bared down a little bit and was able to get its stop. Um, but then you get to the end of the half stuff. And oh boy, Kevin. Um, oh boy. So KU runs the screen out wide to Emmanuel Henderson. That's fine. You're trying to get your playmaker in space at the start of a drive, right? Better than running the ball because you've not been able to. Missouri calls a timeout. Then KU runs the ball with Highshaw and he runs out of bounds.
Yep.
And that was the moment that Leipold pointed out post game where they're like, that's on us. That's coaching, because he needs to know that he can't go out of bounds because we're trying to run out the clock. Okay. For me, Kevin, the play that is the most like, what is then running Jalen Daniels on third down on an option when it's what, 3rd and 7, I think it is.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, 3rd and 7, Jalen Daniels rush. Why? I understand you want to run the clock, but all of a sudden now you're in 3rd and 7. Who cares if it's an incompletion at that point? It's inconsequential.
Yeah.
Like try and get the first down. And so I think the fact that, it just was another one of those moments where it felt like KU got tight and conservative at the end of a half. It felt like 2024 all over again. And it's one of those moments, Kevin, that just, watching it live, you're like, oh boy, this is not, you're giving the ball back to Missouri with how much time, and their offense has started to kind of find a little of a groove against KU's defense. It was just one of those where it's like, oh brother, like not this again.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think you could have done either at the start of the drive, right? Like you could have said, "Hey, let's go try and get points," or you could have said, "Hey, let's be conservative and run the clock out." But to your point, when Highshaw goes out of bounds, the running the clock out is off the
It's
board.
over.
You
It's
can't do
over.
that anymore. And so I agree with you on the third down call. The other thing that's kind of funny about it and is KU winds up punting, of course. Missouri has a flag on the punt, winds up at what, like the 10-ish yard line. I'd love to give an exact yard line, but the KU stats site actually isn't working for me right now, so I can't look at I can't look at the stat thing. But then Swain, Missouri is backed up. They're like 90 yards away. They're trying to run out the clock at this point. They're saying we are not going to go 90 yards down the field. They run the ball up the middle, and what happens? They break a huge run. And that puts Missouri. It's one of those things where it's like disaster had to happen at 3 or 4 different points in order for disaster to happen, and it happened at each of those points. If Highshaw stays in bounds, if KU decides to not be so conservative after Highshaw goes out of bounds, if KU just stops Missouri for a 2 yard gain, they probably go into the locker room and don't do anything with it. But you have disaster in so many areas, and it reminded me, and I told you this before we got on, reminded me a lot of the Arizona State game a year ago, where KU
Mm.
gets the turnover. Mello Dotson strips the ball out, I believe, from Jalen Tyson. KU has the ball, and you're like, okay, do you try and go get points here? They go really conservative, which again, it's like, okay, get in the locker room. Well, then they punt the ball. Arizona State gets a big punt return and winds up
Yeah.
in for key points, right before half. And it was a similar thing in that, everything kind of went right for Missouri there. And it was hurt by, multiple bad decisions. And then, quite frankly, just not stopping a run up the middle when Missouri was fully content to go to the locker room after the penalty on the punt return.
Yeah. And so it gives, Missouri ends up right. There's a good play to Kevin Coleman, who,
Yeah.
oh my God, he's so good.
He's
Like
really,
he's so
their
good.
group of receivers are really good. Alubade is going to be terrific,
Oh,
obviously, but man, Kevin Coleman can go.
yeah. And that's one of the things, like, what maybe we'll talk about later in big picture stuff, but like, this is also maybe one of the better receiver groups KU's going to play all year. Like, I'm trying to think, like, Texas Tech maybe has some good receivers in that regard, but like, man, those guys are good. And they made some huge plays I'm sure we'll talk about here in the second half. But okay. So in the wildest way possible, Kevin, it is 21-21 at halftime. Like
Yeah,
I like, it's one of those where if you're like a general college football fan and you're like, oh, I wonder what's going on in the board war. All right. Oh, it's 21-21. All right, they both scored 3 touchdowns. No. It was the weirdest way to get to 21 points that I have seen.
yeah,
And at halftime, I'm thinking, okay, first of all, KU's now back behind the 8 ball a little bit here because Missouri has started to figure some things out. KU's had some of those disastrous moments. They've had the end of half stuff that has just been an issue for multiple years now. How are they going to stick with it? And then, KU, opens the second half and, it's a long drive for Missouri, but KU finally gets a stop on fourth down. And that was an interesting one that I want to bring up here, Kevin, because I was looking at the numbers. It's a toss up on that one
yeah,
for Missouri in terms of go or don't. The analytics site I'm using says toss up. Drinkwitz went for it. He played aggressive. And I think that is one of the things that when you look at this game back in totality, I think this kind of decision from him shows where his mindset was at, which is I got to go foot on the throttle, try and win this game. Now, granted, he's also under a lot of pressure. If you went and looked at Power Mizzou, you would have seen that there had been, riots if Missouri had lost to KU. And so
A lot
Jurgens
of
knows that.
a significant portion of Missouri fans, at least the ones in my mentions, and I'm sure it was the same in yours, thought Missouri was going to roll in this game heading in. Like, thought it wasn't going to be close. And so I think you and I both thought different, right? Like, Missouri hasn't blown out a lot of people recently under Eli Drinkwitz.
And KU
KU
doesn't get blown out.
doesn't typically get blown out, and so. But your average, like, they don't look at that, and so they're like, "Well, Missouri's going to 40 ball KU. They're going to win by 25." And so when you got to that point, it was interesting because I had this conversation with Nick actually. K-State last year was a tremendous atmosphere. I really thought, but I'm not sure there was ever a point where the stadium felt nervous. And like even when KU was up late, it was like the fans were like, "Oh, we're gonna win this game, right?" Like we 16 or whatever the number is, like 15 straight at the time. We're going to win this game. There was a time in the second half, Swain, where the energy in Faurot Field kind of shifted to a little bit of nervousness. I feel like, and it wasn't. I'm not saying it wasn't there when KU took the lead in the fourth quarter. I started to feel it right about this point, I think, where KU got the stop on fourth down, where it was like Missouri had all the momentum. They got the ball after half. They're going down the field, and KU gets a stop like, oh, like I thought we were going to go right down and score, and this is going to be our game now. And all of a sudden it's not. And the other thing that I'll say real quick is I did talk to a few Missouri fans after the game, and they felt like a big part of Eli's aggressiveness was the fact that they had a true freshman kicker that he just didn't trust. And so that, yes, he was aggressive, but also part of that may have been out of his hands a little bit, because if you were in a situation where it's like, hey, should I go or attempt a little bit longer field goal, you didn't trust that guy to attempt that field goal.
Yeah, and it'd been a 45-yard field goal on this 4th
Yeah.
and 4 that we're talking about here. And look, like Trey Lathan makes a great pass breakup on the
Yep.
3rd down play. And then Jalen Todd shows up on the 4th down play, which again, I think you saw some flashes from KU's cornerbacks, but it was a game where I think you just saw how good Missouri was and that it was very hard for KU's corners to kind of contend with that. So KU then gets the ball back and they're able to move it. And we get to another 4th down call for KU that I think is really interesting. I'm going to pull up here. Make sure I get the right one. Yep, 3rd quarter. Okay. So KU gets to a 4th and 3, right? There have been some solid plays. Obviously there's the face mask call, which that was very questionable. I think it was a pinky on the face mask, if anything. That helps KU on that drive. Then obviously there's, the good throws to Hanukkah on back-to-back plays. And then KU gets into the red zone and the drive stalls. And so KU's got a 4th and 3 at the 9-yard line. KU elects to go for a field goal attempt. I'm bringing this up again just to show that, okay, the decision analytically, it says go for it. I would have said, yeah, go for it. Be aggressive. If you don't get it, okay, Missouri's 91 yards away. Your defense had a little bit of a bend don't break moment, but you're forcing Missouri to go 91 yards. And if they do, you kind of just got to tip your cap. But KU decides to kick a field goal. It's one of those moments where you look at kind of the win probability. KU goes for it, 50% win probability overall. If KU fails, that's 43%. If they succeed and they get the first down, it's a 60% win probability, basically. If you kick a field goal attempt and succeed, it's basically a 50% win probability. So it's one of those where when you look at the total win probability, 50 versus 48, not a big difference, but the risk reward of that, I think, really does show up. And it's one of those moments where I think for KU, it's like, yeah, I would have leaned aggressive in that moment, just considering all the other factors that you'd seen in the 3rd quarter in that point.
That's interesting, because I remember thinking at that point that I was sure the analytics would probably say go for it without the numbers in front of me. I thought it was an analytical go for it thing. And it wound up being a lot closer to, like you said, like it's closer to 50-48 when you look at that part of it. I agree with you on the risk reward. And if I had seen that part at that time, I probably would have said go for it. But even thinking that analytically it probably was a go for it moment, I thought at the time I would take the points just because of the emotional part of you're in a big rivalry game. You haven't scored since that crazy ass first quarter, right? And so, you've been stuck at 21 a really long time, and
Sure.
whatever the failure rate is there, the failure rate emotionally, I think, from not having any points for that long of a time period, I feel like it could have been one of those things where it's like, oh, we didn't score again type of deal. And they hadn't really had the ball in the second quarter, too, as we were talking about. And so to me, even though I thought analytically it probably was a go for it moment, I thought in real time, hey, take the field goal, get some points on the board where it's like, okay, you got the lead back, you're on the right side of the scoreboard, you have some points. And so I was a kick at the time, actually.
Yeah, I understand that. The psychological aspect, right? And that's what numbers don't account for. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a good point that I hadn't really considered. The fact of like, if KU had gone for it and not gotten it, now the defense back out there like, oh my God, here we go again. All right, we gotta, it's all on us.
Yep.
And what maybe that would have done to the offense of a failed moment there, then carrying over from really the last two times the offense was on the field. It's at the end of the first half when they failed and didn't move the chains and didn't get to halftime, or the time before that when it's the fumble safety. So yeah, that's a really good point, Kevin, in terms of the psychological aspect and what that could have done. So, okay, KU decides to kick the field goal. It's good because Lath Marjon is good. And then this is kind of when I think the game got into this kind of funky stage where then Missouri's able to go on the drive, right? It ends up, a couple third down conversions for
Yep.
Missouri. And it's just one of those, I'm not going to say death by 1,000 cuts because it wasn't as long of a drive as, we've certainly seen Missouri have in this game, but it was one of those drives where then they get it, touchdown 28-24 at that point. And that's when I'm like, ooh, all right, this is going to be a real big gut check time for KU. Because at that point, just some of the momentum it felt like was starting to go back Missouri's way.
Yeah, and on that next drive, I think you saw that KU felt that because you ran back-to-back shot plays to Emmanuel Henderson, including, on a third down rather than, kind of going for the, hey, let's move the chains and get this thing going again. It was KU was trying to have the big, the 35-point play, if you will, where, yeah, it's worth 7 on the scoreboard, but if you hit on one of those bombs to Emmanuel Henderson and it's a touchdown, after Missouri just drove down the field to take the lead, Missouri's reeling a little bit. And so I understand why they wanted to do it. I'm not sure I would have gone to that well twice in a row, and Jalen missed on both of them. Interestingly enough, Swain, like the quarterbacks have talked all camp, and even I believe Zeke said back in the spring, you can't overthrow Emmanuel Henderson. Jalen did it twice in a row.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that too is the last time that he and Henderson connected on the deep throw right against Wagner. It was an
Yep.
underthrow for Jalen.
Yeah.
Not consciously, but subconsciously, that's there of like, bro, you can't like Emmanuel Henderson is wide A open. You don't underthrow him. And a little bit of adrenaline and juice, and all of a sudden you overthrow him by 5 yards.
Yeah.
It really wasn't particularly close on really either one of those. So then the defense gets a stop. And it's a fourth down from Missouri, right? 4th and 1 at their 45. They take a delay of game, or they end up having a delay of game. And KU gets the ball back. And this again for me was this another time, Kevin, and maybe we'll talk about this at the end, but like this game was full of gut checks for KU. And that's why I coming out of this game, I am a little bullish about KU, is the fact that they got punched in the mouth several times. And for a team that has not been together, it's a bunch of new guys playing together.
Yeah.
And You don't know how that's going to go. You can look across the Big 12 right now, Kevin. There are some teams that have new players and new dynamics that are really struggling when they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And for KU to answer the bell again with some big plays on this next drive, like that for me was just okay, like they got it. You got the throw to Hanukkah for 24 yards. You got the throw to Manuel Henderson for 25 yards. Like, to come back and after Jalen overthrows Manuel twice to then have some of these throws in that moment, it's just another one of those kind of checks of like, okay, hey, they have the right mentality in some of these moments.
Yeah. One of the things that we heard all off season was how competitive this group was. And a lot of times it was brought up like, hey, the fact that they're battling for positions and they can actually win them, has been a big part of that. But I think you really saw how competitive they were in this situation, and that there were a lot of times where this game could have gone really south if you didn't have a good response. And they kept clocking in and kept responding. And so this drive was a great example. The funny thing is, I was sitting next to Nick Springer, and on when KU got the ball there, I said, is a Jalen Daniels sort of legacy drive coming in. And Jalen was unbelievable on that drive. The way he threw the ball, he had like the 19-yard scramble, I believe, as well on this drive, and just leads KU right down and takes the lead right back from Missouri.
Yeah, and obviously, right, there's the Daniel Highshaw drop too in there, which was
Yeah.
awful, awful. And KU bounces back,
Yeah.
you know? And something else I noticed too is Cam Pickett started to show up on this drive. I did
Yeah.
not notice him in the first 3 quarters, which tells me, Kevin, that he is banged up. And they
Yeah.
basically were like, we're saving him for when it is kind of nut cutting time.
Yeah.
And that's when all of a sudden you started to see him on the field much more consistently, and he got multiple targets on that drive. And then Sean Hanukkah scores again, and for him,
Yeah.
it was just a really solid game overall, the best game of his college career. And so now it's 31-28, and somehow KU has a lead in the fourth quarter at Missouri.
Yeah.
And like, again, if you would have told Lance Leipold going into the week, hey, there's going to be how much time left here? Less than 5 minutes left. Sorry, 9 minutes left at this point. There's 9 minutes left. You have a lead in Columbia. Would you take that? 10 times out of 10, he's going to say yes. Doesn't matter how he got there, And so for KU, then the defense comes out and Missouri really does move the ball again. And this was one of those where the fourth downs just started to really go for Missouri, and they made some big plays and some really big moments. And the fourth downs, yeah, they had to go for them. It wasn't your coach is being borderline overly aggressive. It was, yeah, you got to go, and their big players made really big plays, and like you can just, yeah, it's just a part of the game. But those 2 fourth down conversions on that drive felt like okay, here it comes. Like this is now kind of Missouri starting to put its own foot on the pedal.
Yeah, and the 4th and 7, obviously, like when you connected on that one, and Lyric Rawls, I mean, triggered on that thing so quickly to get over there, and just a great throw by Bo Pribula and a great catch by Kevin Coleman, and the drive keeps going on 4th and 7. And yeah, to your point, I thought it was interesting. I think you and I both had similar thoughts about the way that we thought KU would want this game to go. From a ball control standpoint, and slowing the game down. There was a ball control team in this game, but it wasn't Kansas. When you look at who had the ball so much more,
Mhm.
who had time of possession, who limited their opponent's number of plays. I believe Missouri wound up with 86 plays
Mhm.
to KU's 49. And I think in the fourth quarter, you started to see that way on the defense, where it was just like, hey, they've been out there a lot. I just brought up Lyric Rawls. I know you brought up the point in your article that I recommend everybody look at, looking at the Pro Football Focus numbers afterwards. Lyric Rawls played every play of this game. And so you think about how hard that is to play in so many high leverage plays over the course of those 86 plays. But Missouri did an amazing job of consistently putting itself in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 1. And then even when Kansas was able to push Missouri back into some long situations, that didn't mean an auto stop. Missouri converted some of those as well. And all those long drives, all those plays, they really added up.
Exactly, Kevin. And this was the time of the game where you really start to see. It's like, it's like boxing, right? Where
Yep.
you see a guy who's just starting to wear someone down and he kind of just starts to lean on him a little bit. And that's kind of what you started to see happen, where it just Missouri kept throwing haymakers at KU. And for a long time, KU was taking them and able to throw some back. But then this was kind of the part of the game where it's like, man, KU's defense has been out there for just too long. And you're asking a lot of them on some of these plays. And they did well to get themselves into a 4th down situation, but just not enough to finish. And I think that's going to be a theme of this game.
I thought it was interesting too. We talked about the 4th and 7. On the 4th and 1, DK McDonald sent the house on that thing. I mean, and it wound up, being pretty much the perfect play call for somebody sending the house. You had the tight end basically sneaking out after some motion. So you have a short throw to the tight end that KU didn't track. So he was wide open and runs in for a touchdown. But I thought that was really interesting because I think, I'm not saying all the time, because there were times that he would send a little bit more pressure, but that was a much more aggressive way of calling that play than I think we've seen over the past few years for Kansas.
Very much so. And I thought we can talk some big picture stuff here at the end with
Yeah.
DK and Zabrowski and everything. But yeah, it was a gamble, and you have to gamble at that point in
Yeah.
the game if you're KU, right? It's one of those where it's the time of the game where you just got to try stuff. And Missouri scores in 35-31. And then this is the point, Kevin, that we're 45 minutes in, and this is the point that everyone wants us to talk about. Kansas gets themselves into a 4th and 7, the 28-yard line. Lance Leipold elects to punt. And I will bring up the numbers here now.
Yep.
I mean, it's negligible. It should be a toss-up, Kevin. The analytics say go for it, a difference of 1.5%. KU's win probability going for it, 12%. If KU punts, it's 11%.
Yep.
It's negligible. And at that point in time, do you trust your offense after what they've done in kind of the 4th quarter? Do you trust your defense after what's happened? What do you think, Kevin? And then I'll give you my take.
Yeah. I thought, like I said, earlier, even though the analytics said go for it, I thought kicking the field goal was the right idea. This is one that in real time, I was like, you got to go for it here. And my thought line on that was a couple different things. One, Jalen was dealing. He was throwing the ball really well. He seemed to be in a good comfort level. When you look at the 3rd down play, I mean, he put that ball right on Emmanuel Henderson, and Emmanuel Henderson had the drop, which is unfortunate because that would have been a 1st down. But that was not an easy throw, Swain, to Emmanuel Henderson out there. I think it was on the sideline about 17 yards down the field or so from the line of scrimmage. And so for me, when you looked at how much the defense had been on the field, when you looked at Missouri being able to control the ball and really, grind things down, I didn't have a lot of confidence in KU being able to go 3 and out defensively and get the ball back. And I thought this is a situation where even though it's not ideal, even though it's on, the wrong side of the field, you really, really, really felt more confident in the offense's ability to get 7 yards than you did in the defense's ability to get a timely stop. And that was where I was at with it. How about you?
Yeah. I felt like it was a go for it.
Yeah.
But man, thinking about that drive and what happened too, I didn't get the same feeling of like, so here, let me explain. So on the first play, Jalen throws it out to Keaton Quebec out wide. It's a bad throw. And Keaton makes a good play to just catch the football. Then the next play, if I remember right, there's some guys open over the middle. I think maybe Bowden was open over the middle, and Jalen kind of waits and doesn't throw it right away. and then he ends up checking it down to Highshaw. And then you get to the third down. And so it didn't feel like in that moment, right, in that exact second, it was like, man, it doesn't feel like Jalen saw the field well in those first kind of couple plays. But still, you felt better about your offense and your passing attack that has been good, getting the yards necessary versus kicking the ball and hoping that your defense has already been on the field for 80 plays or whatever it is. You felt better about that than making your defense go back out there and kind of rolling the dice with that. And I understand, Lance trusting his defense and saying, hey, I believe in you guys. But even, Leipold said, yeah, I understand it's fair criticism if you're going to say that the defense hasn't stopped them. So, it's kind of the damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah,
because
if
sure. KU goes for it and they don't get it, and all of a sudden Missouri's in field goal territory, like the game's over. KU punts and Missouri scores on a 63-yard touchdown, the game's over. So it's one of those where and it's why I think the numbers are interesting, because it just shows you how fine of a margin it is for KU in that moment, where there is this much room for KU to still win the football game. And it's you got to execute. And so the decision KU made, they didn't execute. And, you can sit here on a Sunday morning and talk about, oh, well, coulda, shoulda, woulda, but I think Leipold over his time in situations like this, I think has just been more conservative. And look, if you want Leipold to be Joey McGuire or Riverboat Ron, it's not going to happen. And so I don't think you're going to expect him to all of a sudden turn into this guy who's just going to gamble all the time. That's just not who he is. It's not who he's been as a coach. And he's won a lot of football games as a college football coach. It doesn't matter if you're D3 or if you're at Buffalo or if you're at Kansas. Winning football games is winning football games. And Leipold has his ways.
Even at Kansas, you think about the Oklahoma game, they get a stop on 3 downs, despite the fact that Oklahoma had run the ball fairly well prior to that. And I remember watching that game, I'm sure you do as well, thinking there's no way KU's defense gets a 3 and out here and they get the ball back. They do that. They lead the game-winning drive down the field and win that football game. And so it doesn't always happen the way that you think it's going to, or the way that it should. And to your point, yeah, it's who Lance Leipold is, and it's the way that he's typically tackled these situations in the past, and he's had a lot of success with it. And that's not saying that we can't sit here and second guess or say, hey, you should change this or whatever. But it is, instructive to know that, hey, if this happens again later this year, Swain, I'm not sure we're going to see a different response.
No, exactly. And honestly, Kevin, here's my thing. The end of the first half stuff is so much more concerning for me than this decision.
Yes, 100%.
The fact that KU bleeds points in close games to end first halves is more concerning for me than deciding to punt or go for it when your margin is this small, right? What would have helped things for KU is not giving up 3 points at the end of the first half. And maybe your offense is able to go score at the end of the first half.
Yeah.
That changes the game for KU. And so this thing for me, it's like, yeah, it's just who Leipold is. And I think you have to understand that and not project of what you want your head coach to be. I think that for me is the big difference. And it is what it is. I know it's not really a great podcast.
No,
I don't know. So
the funny thing about the end of the half is I think Lance Leipold was typically maybe more. We've talked about how he typically skews more conservative overall. After what happened against UNLV a year ago, where it was, hey, if you just take the ball into the locker room, you may win that game. And instead, Jalen throws a pick and UNLV gets the touchdown. I think Lance, if I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't, like I'll stick with what I'm comfortable with in those situations. But to your point, like when you're in that situation after a high shot goes out of bounds, and I hate to belabor that point so much, but it really was one of those things where it's like, well, running out the clock is no longer an option here. And Missouri is going to get the ball with enough time to move the ball. you can't play this thing. You have to go and try and get that first down on third down.
And I'd argue, not to go back, but the moment that Drinkwitz calls that timeout, that tells you he wanted the ball back.
Yeah.
And so you got to know at that point that I think you kind of maybe have to change your own approach there.
Yeah.
But okay, not to go back on that. But so at the end of the game, right, Kevin, then, I think it's Roberts breaks free, scores, and just at that point, it's game over. Jalen throws an interception, whatever. He's trying to throw it away. He's scrambling for his life. Okay. 55 minutes in. Let's get some big picture stuff here, Kevin. What are you most encouraged about coming out of this game?
I thought Missouri was the better team. I really did. And I thought the better team won the game. I thought when you looked at the yards that they made after contact, there was a physicality there as well as everything else. They had the ball a ton to KU's time. And have Bo Pribula was dealing to a wide receiving group that was unbelievable. Missouri's defensive line is terrific. And the reason I'm saying all this about Missouri is, Swain, KU had a chance to win this game. And I think that's the encouraging thing when you look at it. And I'm not inclined to take moral victories from rivalry games in particular. It really stings, obviously, to lose those games, especially when you do have a chance. But Swain, when you look at all these different factors, like, it's easy to look at it and be like, well, this is a game that shouldn't have been as close as it was. And yet KU found a way to have the lead with less than 9 minutes left. KU found a way to have the ball with under 5 minutes left in a one possession game, where if you go down and score, you're taking the lead right back and maybe winning the football game. And so I think when you look at that, that's the encouraging part of that. I also thought too, Swain, some of the offensive linemen, and I'm not saying that, Calvin, I thought, had some struggles at times. There were some times when Jalen was kept pretty clean, and Jalen did really well when he was kept clean.
Mm-hmm.
This was Enrique Cruz's best game from a pass protection standpoint.
For
This
sure.
is Amir Herring's best game from a pass protection standpoint. And KU had no running game to speak of. And still, again, you're right there with a chance to win. And so I think big picture, when you look at this going forward, this may be the best team that KU faces all year. I think they're certainly going to be in that discussion. And so for KU to get outmatched in certain areas, to have things that KU wants to do, like control the ball, run the ball, to have that rug pulled out from under you, and you're still sitting there with the chances to win the game that they had, I think is highly encouraging.
For sure. Yeah, Kevin, it's the best team KU's going to play all year. I think Texas Tech probably is next up. Utah's looked pretty good. Looked pretty good. But, dude, okay, let's do this. This was the best defensive line and linebacker group KU's going to play all year.
For sure.
Second to none. I think there's an argument to be made this is the best wide receiver room KU's going to play all year.
I would agree.
We got to see what happens with Bo. But is he the best quarterback KU's going to play all year?
He was really good.
Really good.
It may be that he's not the best long-term quarterback that KU faces, but if you took the Bo Pribula that played on Saturday, he might be, because don't get me wrong, there were some times where he was throwing to open receivers because those receivers were really good.
Yeah.
There were also 4 or 5 high leverage passes where he just dropped it into a bucket about this big, and he was terrific. I will say one other big picture thing that was very encouraging, Swain. Bo Pribula can run the ball, and KU did not get hurt by a running quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's really the one play that Pribula did a good job on. And here's my thing, Kevin. And my point on that is, Kevin, Missouri's in a different league.
Yeah.
Not SEC Big 12, different league in terms of money. Yeah. And you can look. All right, here's a good example. Missouri's right tackle was in the transfer portal, transfer from Wake Forest. I know KU had interest in him. That interest went away from the player side when Missouri doubled what KU could offer. That's what it is. That's the difference. In the trenches, Missouri has guys who are very expensive and who are
Missouri
out of
went
KU's
out.
budget.
Missouri went out and got Caden Green on the other tackle from Oklahoma 2 years ago. And Missouri got
Definitely
Bo
didn't tamper.
Pelini from Penn State. Ahmad Hardy was one of the most attractive running backs in the portal. Their defensive line guys that they got from Georgia. I mean,
Kevin Coleman, a
Kevin
1,000-yard receiver in the SEC.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's when you look at all of that. Yeah, it was a roster that was very well constructed through the transfer portal, and you do not construct rosters really well through the transfer portal without some serious expenditure.
Yeah, kids aren't going there because they love Columbia and because playing at Missouri is the greatest. It's sure he gets playing the SEC, that's great. Sure, there's a scheme there that does a really good job of putting guys in position to have success. Right, they had guys go in the NFL that were wide receivers, but you got to pony up too. And Missouri has put the money into football to pony up. And so that's one of the things I think stood out to me was the fact that KU's in a game with this team, a little smash and grab a little bit, but still, you could say vice versa, that there were some smash and grab moments for Missouri as well. But
Yeah,
the fact that KU's in this game, that KU's defensive line made really good plays throughout the course of this game. Look, for most of the game, Kevin, Missouri's, EPA run stuff was awful. It was as bad as KU's was until the fourth quarter
yeah,
when KU's defenses, started to wear down. So KU's defensive line in this game, I think, is a really encouraging aspect because, yeah, Missouri's offensive line is probably not the best KU's are going to play all year. They'll probably play a good offensive line in the Big 12 at some
Utah,
point.
Utah.
Oh, yeah, Utah. Whew, they got two tackles that are going to be day one or day two picks. So
Yeah,
there'll be better offensive lines KU plays. But the fact that in this game, KU's defensive line continued to get in the backfield and set up the linebackers to make plays is super encouraging.
yeah,
I think, you can look at for KU offensive line wise. Yeah, there's room to grow, right? Calvin Clements, trial by fire. I'll tell you what, for your first start against a P4 team to have it be this Missouri defensive line, that's tough. Like
yeah,
that is not easy. I guess Calvin actually started against Baylor, didn't he? Yeah, he did.
yeah. He did.
It's, but still,
Yeah,
um, like it's just one of those where KU being able to find ways to be in this game despite getting punched, despite being outgunned at certain spots, I think is a positive thing when you look ahead. Now, granted, it also puts in perspective how far KU has to go if they want to be a team that kind of competes at the sharp end of college football. And that doesn't mean playoffs and all of that, but like if you're going to compete to be in the Big 12 title contention picture, you're playing a team like Missouri if you get in the playoffs.
yep,
And obviously it's not all about the playoffs, right? It's about putting together good seasons and being consistent and being a good winning program. But I do think just a game like Saturday shows where KU has growth, but I think it also shows where KU has taken such big steps forward, where a defensive line and a linebacker room, like Trey Lathan, what a player KU's got. And the fact that he's
yeah.
got,
What a
another
selection.
year left,
Yeah,
and in Bengali, man, playing through that stood out to me a lot, Kevin. If KU had won this game, like there would have been a whole story about Bengali
yeah,
because and Lance talked about this post game a little bit, but in an era of college football where it's a lot of me, I'm going to do what's best for me. Bengali easily could have said, nah, I've got a hurt knee. I'm playing with a big brace. I'm good, guys. I'll see you against West Virginia, if that. But no, he wanted to play in this game. And the fact that he busted his tail to get back and played with the big knee brace on and made some really big plays for KU, right? The pass breakup he has is an incredible
yep.
athletic play. He had some good tackles for loss.
Tackles
Yeah.
for loss. Yeah,
And
I think he
listen,
had 9 tackles or something like that. I like it. He was tremendous.
it's just one of those things where you look at what KU has at linebacker right now and you're like, man, they've got dudes. And so it's a game that is not great for KU, right? There are concerns. You can look at the clock management being a
Yep.
continued issue over the course of multiple years. You can look at KU's inability to close games. One score games, KU does not close well. I was thinking about this last night on the drive back. When was the last time KU closed really like one score games well consistently? They really haven't, right? It's been kind of KU's up by 2 scores and they're able to do it. BYU last year, yep, one
I
score
want
game.
to say
Right.
23. They had a few games where it was like they were able to kind of lean late and have like a 6-minute drive where they would run the clock and
Mhm.
close out a game.
Yeah, BYU in 23 is
Yep.
definitely one that comes to mind, right? But then you
Yeah.
can look late in that year, right? You've got a close loss against K-State, a close loss
Yeah.
against Tech, a one-score win over Iowa State, which is really good, the one-score win over Oklahoma, but then a one-score loss to Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those where we're talking almost 2 years now since KU closed those types of games well. And so it's
Yeah.
just an area where KU has to improve. If Leipold says it all the time, KU's going to play in a lot of one-score games. The margins are going to be fine. KU can't bleed points in those marginal moments, and that's one thing that from this game is concerning for me.
The other thing that I think is an interesting takeaway, you were with me in Memphis in 2002 or 2022.
I don't. Where was
Yeah.
I in 2002? I was
Yeah, yeah.
young.
Let's not get into that because I don't need to feel old this early on a Sunday. But in 2022, you were in Memphis with me, and we talked about how different physically Arkansas looked to KU, and how you looked at the EPA like you said, and it started to get away from KU from a running standpoint in the fourth quarter once they wore down.
For sure.
KU didn't need to wear down against Arkansas. Arkansas just lined up and basically, hey, our guy is better than your guy, is bigger than your guy, is stronger than your guy. Missouri is significantly better than that Arkansas team was, and you didn't have the same thing, I don't think. You
No.
didn't have I thought Arkansas was bigger, faster, stronger, and KU, it was kind of miraculous that they wound up going to 3 overtimes with how
Mm.
overmatched they were physically, and we talked about how in that next portal cycle, KU went out to get bigger and stronger and try and match up at that level, and I think
Mhm.
we even talked at that point, like, if KU wants to be a better program, they need to match up better physically against the Arkansas of the world. This is another step up, from that, but I was pleased with the way that KU wasn't just totally physically overmatched in the same way that they were against Arkansas.
Yeah. Okay, that's a really good. Thank you for bringing this up, Kevin, because I was going to forget to mention this. So I was on the field for 45 minutes
Yeah,
pregame, watching everyone kind of do their first rounds of warm ups and stretches before they go put the pads on. There wasn't a huge difference.
yeah,
I remember like being on the field at Arkansas and be like, oh my God, this is a different league than KU is in
yeah,
terms of
sure.
the physicality department. Right? You looked at KU's offensive line then versus what Arkansas's defensive line looked like, and vice versa. Man, it really, in terms of a physical, what these guys looked like you could have changed Leroy Harris's jersey. I would have, he'd blend in,
Yeah,
you know, you could change Calvin Clemens's jersey. He would have blended in, not his best game in terms of playing, but in terms of the size and what he has in length, like he'd blend in. So that was something that I think you've just seen the growth. Is
yeah,
is is KU at the level of Missouri in terms of physicality? No, 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 no. I'm not saying that. Let's
yeah,
not get ahead
same.
of ourselves here. But I'm saying it is not a huge gap where you're sitting there pregame like, dude, these guys are so small. They're going to get whooped all game. No, it's not a huge difference. And so that's another area where you can just look and say, yeah, KU has taken some really big steps forward in terms of roster building and roster retention. And I think if you want to get excited about it, you can look at some of the younger players in the program who are starting to travel, starting to show up in games. They match what you see elsewhere across college football in terms of the size profiles and the athleticism profiles.
Yeah, yeah. You look at Jalen Todd and Austin Alexander out there at cornerback; those are second-year guys. John
Yeah.
Kamara being out there, second-year guy. And so it's really easy to kind of get excited about what these guys are going to look like in the next few years as they get more experience, they get more used to being out there. I know DJ Graham played. I believe he had more snaps than Austin Alexander
Yeah.
in this one. But even so, you look at that duo and some of the young corners that KU has, they're looking a little bit different physically than maybe they did a few years back when you had Kobe and Mello out there at 160 pounds apiece or whatever they were, and OJ Burrows out there at like 160 pounds at safety. I mean, it was different.
It was different. And let's also, maybe we can end with this, Kevin. Let's
Yep.
keep in mind what Missouri is as well. It's a program that has won 21 games over the course of 2 years
Yep.
while playing in the SEC. If you want to look at like SEC records, like they won 11 SEC games over the last 2 years. Like it's a good SEC program. This isn't KU going and playing Vanderbilt, right? It's a SEC program that has had consistent success over the last 2 years. And they're going to go win a bunch of games this year too because they're a good team. So I
Yep.
think just keeping that in mind that this is not some crappy Missouri team that's not going to do anything, right? It's another Missouri team that's probably going to go win 9 games.
Yep.
And so the fact that in this game, again, it's not moral victories, it's just measuring sticks for KU when we're learning about this new team that's got a bunch of new players. You're measuring yourself against an SEC team that has won 21 games over the course of 2 years. And so, when you put that in context, like, yeah, sure, KU wasn't perfect. And sure, KU has issues. There are big questions going into the bye week.
Yeah.
But when you return to Big 12 play and you play a West Virginia team that just lost to Ohio, or
And
you play
lost Shaheen
Cincinnati.
White.
Yeah, they lost Jaheim White. I mean, dude, I was looking at it. They changed quarterbacks and then changed quarterbacks back to the initial guy in the game.
Yeah.
Like it's not the same. And so again, when you use this game as a measuring stick for KU, you see how far the program's come, you see how far the program has to go. But it's one of those that I think it makes for a very interesting evaluation for the KU overall.
Yeah, from a teaching tape standpoint, obviously you look at it and you say, if we do this right, if we do this right, if we do this right, we win. And from a teaching tape standpoint, you tell the guys like you have to be more polished, you have to get these things right to win. But at the same time, you can sit there and say, this was a game that if you do things right, if you do things as your coach, you win. And so I think that that's an encouraging thing. And I think the other thing, Swain, is you and I have talked a lot over the years, I feel like, about when bye weeks come. This is a bye week at kind of a perfect time for a team that, you don't want to stew on this thing, but at the same time, it comes at a good time, especially I think there's going to be some sort of guys trying to get back from being banged up a little bit too over the next week.
Yeah, and real quick on that, reinforcements wise, you can see it. Jason Gilliam played for the first time this season.
Yep.
Bengali came back, but a bye week can be great for him. Cam Pickett's been a little banged up. You got Joe Sip, who traveled, warmed up a little bit, didn't really play, didn't have his helmet on. Gage Keys showed up, warmed up a little bit, had a knee brace. But you're looking at these guys who missed the first couple of games who are going to be key defensive players for depth. Kevin, if KU had all of its guys, right, Sip fully healthy, like, the defense probably still wears down because that's 80 snaps is just freaking ridiculous. But
Yep.
maybe it's a situation where, having Sip being able to spell Lathan for 15, 20 snaps and spelling Kamara for 15 to 20 snaps, well, all of a sudden, maybe that gets you just a small edge late in the game. So depth-wise, KU should be in a better spot coming out of the bye week. And I think that's really, really important when you talk about the way that this season kind of flows and you've got, kind of a month plus of games and then a bye week and then some game, so I think it's going to be a really well-timed bye week for KU.
Bryson Canty starts coming back a little bit more, maybe he's ready to have a little bit bigger role. And I think the bye week comes at a really good time.
Yep. I totally agree. Cool, Kevin. All right. This is your time. Any final thoughts as we
No,
part?
like I said, like I know people are going to look at the end and be like, "Oh my God, you talked positively after a loss to Missouri," and I think we aren't saying, "Hey, these are moral victories" or even like silver lining type of things. I love the way you put it, where it's a measuring stick. This let you know where you were at, and when you look at Kansas heading into the Big 12, I do think that this is a team that maybe measures a little bit better on the measuring stick than you would. I don't want to say than you would have thought, but I do think that it was a game that you looked at KU having chances to win it at the end, and Kansas probably isn't going to play too many teams like Missouri the rest of the way. And so, would it really surprise you at the end of the year, Swain, after this result, if KU winds up winning 8 or 9 games and Missouri wins 10 games in the SEC?
No,
Wouldn't
no,
surprise me at all.
no. I remain probably even more bullish that I think KU's going to get to that 8-4 mark at least.
I agree.
after seeing that, just seeing it and seeing also, it doesn't hurt that you've seen other Big 12 teams and oh my God, the conference is kind of bad outside
Yeah.
of Tech and Utah and even maybe Iowa State. But yeah, so I remain very bullish on KU, its schedule and the way things look for this season. But again, KU has to fix some of the issues that are controllable. And
Yep.
that's what a bye week's can be good for. Am I concerned the fact they talked all offseason about fixing some of the stuff and it didn't get fixed in the first chance they had to show it? Sure. But, I still big picture do remain pretty bullish on KU, and I feel better about KU looking ahead this season, maybe than I did even going into the game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And I thought KU would win the game, but I think that the way
Oh,
the
yeah.
game played, I think that even the way the game played out, I think left me a little bit more bullish. Where it was like, hey, they absolutely had their chances to win a game that went away from them in so
Mm,
many different ways, and so I think that actually left me a little bit more bullish than I was heading in as well.
yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for us. Hope everyone has a good bye week. It's going to be weird watching football next weekend, not having KU play, but it'll also be nice. A little time to relax.
Yeah,
Yeah, take care of everything. Hey, thanks as always for listening. Make sure you subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like all the videos, drop comments. That all goes a long way in helping us with the algorithm. Make sure you're checking out Kevin's work, right? KC Sports Network, Pay Heed Podcast, Verbal Commitment Podcast. Kevin's cranking out the podcast content. He's got it covered. So make sure you're checking out all of his content. For Kevin Flaherty, I'm Michael Swain. Thank you as always for listening to the Fog.net podcast. Hope everyone has a great week, and we'll talk to y'all next weekend.